Tonight's talk will be given by Colin Beavan, Senior Dharma Teacher. Colin, in his professional life, is a social activist, a life coach, and an author, and has been really a guiding force at our center, I should say, as far as making sure that our practice, as can be very personal to each one of us, is still engaged with our community at large, and that we stay aware of the really big important issues that, as a group, that we can really come together to address. I suppose the title of this talk is Zen and Sacred Activism, How to Change Everything by Not Trying to Change Anything.
So we bow at the beginning of talks. So. Well, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's especially nice, it being the end of August. A lot of our members are away, so we really appreciate you guys coming and filling up the room. And I was thinking today about this talk, Zen and Sacred Activism, that has this kind of grand title. And I was thinking, first of all, I was thinking about the Amazon. And I think a lot about climate issues and environmental issues, and I'm very rarely overwhelmed by them. But the Amazon thing, the Amazon being on fire, for the first time I find myself wanting to close my computer and put it all away and turn it off. And part of me feels scared that if I really pay attention to what's going on, I'll just give up everything and try to fix it. And then part of me feels like if I really pay attention to what's going on, I'll just go and completely ignore it and feel like an awful person. So I had all those feelings. And then, interestingly enough, shortly after that, a friend of mine called, and he's met this woman on Hinge, which is a dating app, if you don't know. And he was telling me about this woman that he'd met, and said she went to this college and that college and one thing or another, and I found myself starting to get jealous because I was like, oh, I want a partner like that. So I had these two big questions that came up for me in a short amount of time. The first question was, how do I save the Amazon? And then shortly after that, I got the question, how do I get a partner? So I thought it was interesting because then I'm giving this grand talk with this grand title, Zen and Sacred Activism. I was thinking, when I was putting it together, I was thinking, why? Because you don't have to have it here. We don't have to have a title for a talk, or I could have, in fact, I'm a senior Dharma teacher, which means a student could have come and given a talk and I could have just answered questions. I didn't even have to have a talk title. And then I was like, what the hell did I'm just this guy who's like scared about the Amazon and wants a partner. Why am I having to give this talk? And this talk that's called, like, if you called it Zen, that would be like serious enough. Or if you called it Sacred Activism, that would be serious. But I had to go and call it Zen and Sacred Activism. And I was like, what the hell am I going to say? I was thinking about it. So it's Zen and Sacred Activism, and so what does Zen mean? I thought that was the first question. Zen means, our teacher, Zen Master Sung Sang, he said, Zen just means understanding yourself. What are we? What is my relationship to the world? What am I? How can I rightly relate myself to the world in such a way that I suffer less and the people around me suffer less? So that's Zen. And we have a particular set of practices we do to kind of accomplish that understanding of ourselves in relation to the world. So I thought, well, what's sacred activism? And sacred activism is actually understanding that I'm tremendously privileged to ask the question, what am I and what's my relationship to the world? Like, sacred activism is to understand that to practice Zen is an incredible privilege, a privilege of my position in the world. And it's also a responsibility to work for a world in which all people have that privilege, to be fed and to be fairly treated and to be safe, so that they have the dignity of being able to ask this question, like, what am I and what's my, rather than, how do I run away from ice, or how do I get enough food to eat? So Zen is understanding myself, and sacred activism is bringing out about a world where all of us get to have the human dignity, where we get to ask that question. So in other words, if Zen is understanding yourself, that's like enlightenment. What am I? That's like get enlightenment. And sacred activism is help all beings. In Buddhism, we say get enlightenment and then help all beings. Or in the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, we say that the law is love the Lord your God with all your body, all your mind, and all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's the same thing. To actually love the pattern of existence and then help all beings. Or another way to think about that is, if you can't kind of fully get enlightenment or fully love the pattern of all beings, it's find some way to not despise existence and not worry about things so much, so that you're not so overwhelmed with worry that you can't help other people. And similarly, to help other people enough so that you actually stop thinking about yourself and can see the pattern of existence. That when we move on to helping other people, that we actually stop thinking about ourselves so much. And so the two things go together, that the purpose of spiritual practice is to come to the place where we can help others. And in part, the purpose of helping others is to get our mind off of ourselves so that we can get enlightenment. And so the two actually come together in Zen, in sacred activism, this idea of helping oneself and helping others. And so the law of life, sometimes people talk about, especially in the Abrahamic traditions, talk about the law. What's the law? And I love this saying. It's by this ancient Zen master called Zen Master Kwan, and he said, likewise, helping oneself and helping others are like the two wings of a bird. So that the law, the way of life, the way of life, is to find this balance between how we help ourselves and how we help others. That there's this kind of balancing act to be achieved. Andrew Harvey, he's a Catholic, and he's the one that coined this term, sacred activism. He was talking, he's in this book here that's called The Hope, which is about sacred activism. He tells this story about Mother Teresa, and he says that this very opulently dressed Indian man with like gold jewelry dripping off him, a rich businessman, went to see Mother Teresa, and he bowed down to her, and he said, "Oh my God, thank you so much. You've sacrificed everything. You've renounced everything just to help other people." And she started laughing maniacally, like just laughing, and apparently the people around her were worried because she'd just had 2 heart attacks, but she was laughing, and finally she stopped laughing, and they were like, "Why are you laughing?" And they said, "Because you're the one that's renounced everything. You've renounced everything of meaning so that you can have all that gold and you can have all that stuff." This sacred activism, Andrew Harvey says these words, writes these words. He says, "I pray that the vision of sacred activism will give you the hope that will enable you to go through the danger and difficulty with a tender heart, a peaceful mind, an increasingly supple and loving body, and a passionate and restless hunger to do all you can to preserve human and animal life on earth." And it really struck me because he said, a tender heart, a peaceful mind, a supple and loving body. He never said, "I hope you're so scared and frightened and angry that you do something about the world." He actually talked about like a way of being that's joyful. And this vision of joy and peace in trying to change the world instead of being attached to fear and anger really interests me. And it interests me because, of course, that fear and anger arise in me all the time. I question myself when that fear and anger arise as to whether I can, because oftentimes my fear and anger arise at whoever I've decided are the oppressor or the oppressive class, I find that my fear and anger are actually largely around punishing the oppressive class, not helping the oppressed class, right? So this idea of joy and peace, and also there's so much research that shows that when we're happy, we actually help more people. So this idea of an activism that's joyful and peaceful is really interesting to me. And so I want to return to this business about, first of all, my thoughts about the Amazon and about getting a romantic partner. And because the reason why it's interesting to me is because, like, let's think about when I crave something, whether it's a romantic partner or more money or a better career or anything like that. What happens is I imagine some other place that I imagine I could be, like this other place where there's more money or a better job or a better partner. There's this other place. And then I imagine the place that I'm in. Like, it's not actually the place that I'm in. Like, the place that I'm in is right here in this funny gray robe talking to you, right? But I could imagine this place that I'm in, which is this place of lack. But actually there's no lack, right? Just in this moment, just in this place, just right here, right now, I absolutely lack nothing, right? But I can imagine, so I make up this story where I imagine this place that I want to be, and I imagine this place of lack, right? So there's a story of where I want to be, there's a story of where I am, which are both actually don't exist, and then I create a story of how to get from the story of where I think I am to the story of where I think I want to be, and it's all fiction. But I act it out. And it's like shadow boxing. It's like as though I have a sword, right? And I'm fighting ghosts. But meanwhile, while I'm busy fighting these ghosts that you guys can't even see because you don't know where I think I am and where I think I want to go and how I think I'm going to get there, my sword's hitting you, right? So in other words, when I'm not paying attention to this moment, this right here, right now, I find ways where I mistakenly do violence against it because I'm not actually reacting to things as they are right here, right now. That's just in the case of wanting a partner or wanting a better job. But the same applies to wanting to fix the Amazon. Because, like, for me, what I noticed, well, first of all, like I said, I have these stories like, wait, I'm so frightened. I feel like I need to get a bucket and I need to go south, that's what I feel like I need to do. Get a bucket, go south. And I actually wrote this to a Zen master. She said, how big will your bucket be? It's like, well, what will that do? It's not to say that actually people going south to volunteer doesn't help at all, but I also have a daughter that I have to support and to love. So I have this one story, which is just go. And then because I have that story of doing such a grand gesture, I then tell myself the story, I can't do anything at all, right? So I stop myself. Or I create a story about the president of Brazil who refused to take money from the Europeans to put the fires out. Or I create a story about the president of this country who hasn't said anything at all about the fires. And then I find out that the Amazon fires are nothing compared to the fires in the Congo, right? And then all of a sudden, I can be, first of all, I can start to just get angry and like write things on Facebook. And the thing about it is that as I put anger out, like the people who are at the other end of my anger do not go, you're so right, I'd love to come along with you and do the things you care about. They just be like, you're an asshole, And so anger is not a way to communicate. So these stories about the fear and the anger and the stories, and they all cloud my judgment and get in the way of my compassion and my love. And not only that, but all of these stories that I tell, even the stories about the Amazon, are stories that I'm telling myself to move away from the discomfort of simple grief and sadness, right? So I'd be like, I feel sad, right? The Amazon fire, I'm sad. And then I think, it's Donald Trump's fault. And I'm going to write some mean things about Donald Trump, right? But the reason why I'm going to write some mean things about Donald Trump is not because it's going to put the fires in the Amazon out. It's because I think that somehow maybe writing some mean things about Donald Trump will actually push my sadness and my fear away, right? It's not a... And the thing about this, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with the book Animal Farm by George Orwell. But in that book is, he actually wrote that as an allegory about Stalin and just after World War II. But anyway, in Animal Farm is about a literal farm where the humans are in charge, but the humans are really mean to the animals, and they slaughter the animals and they eat them, and the animals are all scared and they don't like it, and they finally decide that they're going to overthrow the humans. And the pigs become the leaders of the animals, and they create like a Bill of Rights for the animals. And one of the things in the Bill of Rights is all animals are created equal. Anyway, they're scared and they're angry and they kill. Oh, and the other thing they say is that nobody's allowed to live in the farmhouse because that's an area of privilege, right? So they overthrow and kill all the humans. And the pigs are in charge, and then sooner or later the pigs actually start walking on two legs. They start becoming just like the humans. And they actually move into the farmhouse. And the other animals say, this is crazy, like how come you get to live in the farmhouse and we don't? We all said that all animals are created equal. And the pig said, that's true. All animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And so the point is that the fear and anger that the animals had, where they overthrow the humans, right? It didn't change the paradigm. It just changed who was in charge. So this fear, like the whole reason, why is the Amazon on fire? Why do we have, why is this whole country scared of immigrants? And it's based on fear and anger and selfish desire, a misunderstood, like the man that went to Mother Teresa and renounced the true life and the true way, right? It's based on this fear and anger. And then if we use our fear and anger to overthrow it, then the question is, do we actually create a new paradigm that is just, or does it just become another, the same paradigm all over again, but this time the pigs are in charge? So the thing is that in Zen, what we do is we sit and we watch, right? So you can, if you sit and you watch, if you watch carefully, you could watch the story about needing a romantic partner, or you could watch this story about the Amazon, and you could just be like, well, what do I do in the face of the Amazon, or what do I do in the face of the fact that I wish I had a partner, or anything else, right? And if you watch your mind carefully, if you just sit carefully and don't attach, we say the great way is not difficult, just don't attach to anything that arises in your mind. So you don't attach to anything, but you just watch. If you watch carefully, then sooner or later you see that every variety of story comes up. I need a partner. I don't need a partner. I should go to the Amazon. I shouldn't go to the Amazon. I should ignore the Amazon. I should completely embrace every single story. If you really watch, right? You just see every single contradictory story comes up. And that underneath all of those stories is this not knowing. Like, the truth is that we're living in a mystery where oftentimes most times we actually don't know what to do. I'm sad about the Amazon. What should I do? Don't know. What am I? And what's my relationship to the world? Don't know. So in our practice of Zen, what we do is we actually embrace this not knowing mind. And in not knowing, we can see the world clearly. Once we move, when we actually see, for all these stories that are crossing the movie screen on my mind, actually the truth is don't know. At that point, then compassion and love can arise in response to the problems, like an intuitive response, an intuitive loving response can arise. We have a story in our tradition called Namchan's cat. And it goes like this. It goes that Zen Master Namchan was in ancient China, and he had a monastery, and And there were 500 monks living in the east wing of the monastery and 500 monks living in the west wing. And there was a cat that also lived in the monastery, and the cat sometimes would cuddle up with the monks in the east wing, and sometimes the cat would wander into the west wing and cuddle up with them. And if you know cats at all, the cat just went where the food was best, right, at the moment, but in between the two. And one time, Zen Master Namchan was walking past the Dharma room where the monks were supposed to be meditating, these 1,000 monks, but instead of meditating, they were arguing. They were arguing over whose cat was the real cat. And because they were Buddhist monks, they didn't just argue like who does the cat actually belong to. They were like, we take better care of the cat. No, we take better care of the cat. It's a little bit like we can be in this country. Like, we're the ones that know best how to take care of this country on this side of the aisle. No, we're the ones that know best how to take care of the, like, we're the best. No, we're the best. We can take care of the cat. We can take care of the cat. Arguing over who has control of the cat, but not actually caring for the cat. So Namchan's walking past and he hears this argument, and he walks into the Dharma room and he grabs the cat and he holds it up by the scruff of the neck, and he said, "You monks!" Oh, and he pulls out, by the way, he's holding the cat in this hand, he pulls out what's called his precepts knife. Now, at that time, monks always carried a knife that they used to shave their head. It's called their precepts knife because precepts are these Buddhist vows, and hair was considered ignorance grass, and so to keep part of keeping precepts was to shave your head with this knife. So he pulls out his precept knife, which is very sharp, and he holds it up to the cat's neck, and he says, "You monks, say one true word and I'll save this cat. If you can't, I'll kill it." So these monks have been forever like meditating, right? And practicing Zen, and the question is like, what is the actual purpose of their practice, right? Is the purpose of their practice just to get some kind of individual enlightenment and feel better? So some monks might have been like, well, it doesn't matter about the cat, because I'm just taking care of my own practice. Or other monks might have been like caught up in this fight over whose cat is actually was. And still other monks would just have been like flabbergasted that the Zen master would actually be threatening the cat, right? So, but everybody was angry and frightened and scared, and nobody was doing something to save the cat. And no one could, as the story goes, no one could speak, and Zen Master Namchan slit the cat's throat. Now, I always say, questions about what Zen masters are doing killing cats aside, the question is, how do we find a way where it's not about the fight, but it's actually about saving the cat? Which returns us to this place of don't know. Like, how can I help this world? Don't know. And it actually gets to the point where in some ways the confusion becomes so great with this practice of putting down the stories. Like every time a story comes, the Amazon is like this and these people are doing that and they're the bad people and we're the good people, and put that down and return to don't know. The next story comes up, put that down and return to don't know. The next story comes up, put that down and return to don't know. It actually comes to the place where it's so confusing that only one thing becomes clear. How can I help? Like the same thing with wanting a romantic partner. Like if how do I get a romantic partner, right? I actually pay attention. Every kind of question comes up, every kind of answer comes up, until I realize that I can't think of anything to do. Like I don't know what to do. And the only thing that seems to make any sense in the face of all the confusion, right, in the face of the mystery, is just this, well, I don't know how to get a romantic partner. I don't know how to put all the fires out in the Amazon. And the only thing that makes sense is, how can I help? And that vow is not even a vow, according to the Zen tradition, that we have to create, but a vow that naturally arises when we put down these stories about enemies and oppositions and all that kind of thing. This question of, how can I help, just comes up all by itself. And we don't necessarily get a cognitive answer. That is to say, a strategy doesn't necessarily pop into our head like, oh, I know what to do about the Amazon. But but in holding this vow, just the Amazon's on fire, how can I help? How can I help? That moment to moment as we go through our days, the helping nature, the compassionate, loving nature will arise by itself, not according to what we think and strategize, but as long as we're putting down our stories, that the compassionate and loving nature comes up all by itself, and that we find ourselves helping. And we may not even get to know how we're helping or why it's useful what we're doing, but we get to help all the same. And so in our practice, there's that, like, hold on to the mystery, just don't know, and allow how can I help to arise, right? But it's also sometimes nice to have some words and ideas to support that. And so I just thought to finish that Andrew Harvey has what he calls the 7 laws of sacred activism, which I've adapted a little for the talk because some of his language is not my favorite, but so how can we help? So according to Andrew Harvey, first is the law of sacred practice. And there are many, many types of spiritual practice. We, as I've said, we practice meditation and we hold this not knowing mind and allow the compassionate nature to arise. As I've said, some people prefer to use language like following the will of God, or in other traditions. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that we let go of the idea that we're the ones that know everything, right? That there's some sort of wisdom that can arise in us beyond our thinking mind, beyond the stories that we tell ourselves, beyond the fear and anger, and that if we practice regularly, whatever is the particular practice we choose, that this not knowing mind can arise, and that we can come to a place of trust and understanding in the universe, and in trusting and understanding the universe, we can actually be effective as activists. The second law, he says, is the law of letting go of results. So it's an interesting idea, right? So a lot of times, like me, I'm like, how do I put the fire out in the Amazon, right? If I hold this vow of how can I help, well, how does that actually result in fixing the Amazon? Or any of my, if I go on a march, how does that actually help? If I write a letter to a congressperson, how does that help? If I make a phone call to a city councilor, does it really help? The idea here is that our action actually isn't chasing after some desire or chasing after some result that we want to achieve, but that we're actually following our nature. That we've put down our ideas and our stories, and we've come to this place of not knowing, where our natural vow of how can I help, how can I be a part, arise all by itself, and we're in this privileged place of actually getting to try, regardless of the results. And not being attached, of course we want results, but not being attached to the results allows us to put down our fear and our anger and actually be in awe. The third law, he says, is the law of recognizing evil, which is language I don't favor. I call it the law of recognizing the source of harm. And the law of recognizing the source of harm is actually to educate ourselves enough to understand where the problems are coming from. Either the systems of consumption, which lead to resource use and fossil fuel use, or systemic racism, which leads to social injustice, or to actually take the time to educate ourselves about the source of harm, all while being careful not to create stories of us and them. The fourth law is his law of transformative anger. And anger is something that I personally have to be really careful with, but our founder, Zen Master Sung Song, told a story about anger. Somebody said to him, is anger good or bad? And he said, there's 2 types of anger. There's attached anger and there's unattached anger. He said, unattached anger is like when you walk with your child to the curb and your child runs out into the street without looking, and you suddenly get a burst of anger and you grab the child by the arm and say, what are you doing? And you pull the child back. Like there's tremendous energy of needing to help the child and stopping the child. That's unattached anger. Attached anger is when you go for the next half an hour, what do you think you're doing? I told you only to cross when there's a green person, and and you're actually, all you're doing is releasing your own fear. You're not actually stopping anything bad from happening, but acting out your fear. That's attached anger. So how can we actually allow our anger to rise up, but then transform and become a helpful energy instead of a punishing energy? The fifth law is the law of shadow work. So I was thinking about why am I giving this talk? Why do I give talks like this? And oftentimes in my activist work is around facilitating understanding, right? And reducing conflict within groups. And the reason why I do that work, frankly, is because my mother and father used to get drunk and throw things at each other, and I'm really sensitive to conflict. I can't stand it when people fight, right? And it's important that I understand that about myself, because when you two are fighting, you're not necessarily going to give each other a bloody nose like my mom and dad did, right? And sometimes some good might come out of your conflict, right? So it's important that I understand. It's important that I understand that I have a personal attachment and motivation to ending conflict. And similarly, that when I'm pointing my fingers at people who, people on the other side of the political aisle for me, sometimes what I'm really doing is not wanting to admit my own complicity in the system. I'm angry at them because they remind me that I'm, like for example, I've not now, but in the beginning of the Trump administration, news that came out around the way that we treat immigrants and the, what do you call it when we send people, the word, deportations, that the Obama administration had deported more people than the Trump administration in the beginning. And I thought about it. I was like, well, why are we so angry now, but we weren't so angry then? And the difference was because, for at least white people like me, it's because Trump was being explicit about it. He wasn't sweeping it under the rug like the Obama administration. He was letting us white people know what we were actually up to. So it wasn't so much that, I'm convinced that at the beginning, not so much now, but at the beginning the anger came not because of the deportations per se, because we'd had the same number of deportations, but because we were being forced to recognize our own complicity, right? So that's understanding your shadow, because sometimes the anger that comes up in me is not about actually helping people who need help, but letting my anger out at people who are showing me something about myself that I don't want to see. The sixth law is the law he says the law of joy. I've changed it to the law of awe and joy and fun. Because first of all, like just this is, like, if you think, like, we're sitting here talking about Zen and sacred activism, that's pretty fucking amazing. Like, we come together as a group of people because we care, we must share some values, right? And we want to do something right. And just anyway, it's also not raining, and also none of us are starving, and also just the awe of we exist. Leave alone our conditions, we exist. So that's the law of joy and fun, just bringing fun into, joking around and fun, bringing fun into this stuff. And the last thing he talks about is the law of community, which is that we need to come together with people who share our concerns and work together. And the good thing about the law of community is that if we want to be activists and help to change the world, then we can find communities of people who are already doing it and just join it. And if we want to actually find some peace and harmony within ourselves as we go about that activism, then there's a community of Zen practitioners right here, and other meditation practitioners around the city and around the world, and other non-meditation types of practice too. And so having said that about the law of community, I guess I should say that you guys are all very welcome to come at any time to practice here. We have beginners nights often on Wednesday nights. We have talks like this once a month. We have a retreat once a month too. And so you're all very welcome to come. All our practice schedules on the webpage. So, yeah. So Zen Master Sung Song said, he used to always finish his talks. He used to say, "I hope you soon get enlightenment and help all beings." So I'll just say, I hope you soon find enough inner peace to be able to create the world that we all want together and help everybody live in a just and a fair world. Thanks. So we have some time for some questions. If you have any questions or comments or anything you want.
Yeah, so I was raised in a Judaic background, and I'm just wondering within this school, where does the concept of, say, well-wishing and prayers and all that sort of stuff, where does that come in within the Choge context as opposed to other contexts?
Yeah, so...
And how it fits into the theme of seeing all sort of calamities, breakdowns, and how you can kind of silently have these kind of relationships with people and places and things that are in process. And, like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, so you said in the Judaic, you come from a Judaic tradition, so are you saying that there's a well-wishing theme that you've seen there that you're asking about as a corollary to what?
A book of prayers is trying to form a relationship to different behaviors, different actions, different things in order to transform. That's the function of the prayer.
Yes.
From my understanding, that's like mysticism and different spiritual studies and different religions. I think ultimately you're trying to elevate the relationship by way of doing that.
Yes.
So
right.
Obviously meditation is I don't know if I'd call it a different vehicle, but I'm wondering I don't even say outside the world of meditation, but within the school's umbrella.
Yes.
And specific to the subject of activism and seeing states that are sub and trying to elevate it with our mind and our heart.
Yes.
Besides our own inner process.
Yes.
Reaching point zero.
Yes.
Where did the other things?
So it's like it's a little bit different in the Zen tradition versus the Abrahamic traditions, in that actually this question of God, whether God exists or doesn't exist, is a question that Buddha didn't answer, right? Similarly, what happens after we die is a question that Buddha didn't answer, any sort of metaphysical question. Largely because, as I put it, when asked personally what happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future, I'm like, I can barely tell what's happening right now, right? So Buddha was really concerned with this question of what's our relationship to the world as it is right before us. And there's this fundamental faith in Buddhism that if we make our relationship with the world correct moment to moment, one way of saying that, if we follow our situation, if we allow the situation that we find ourselves in to guide us, not the stories that go through our head, but the actual, you asked me a question, that's the situation, so my correct function in relation to that situation is just to answer, right? So in another context, if I weren't me, I could be like, why is he talking about Judaism? Is he challenging me? If you could imagine, like, the stories could come up or something like that, which they would. I'm being hyperbolic. They wouldn't. But my point is, there's this question of how do I rightly relate to you in this moment, and then there's a faith that if moment by moment by moment I correctly relate, then things will unfold as best they should. That's called together action, that I am acting together with you in the world. And if you like, we can, once I'm together, if I'm truly acting together with you and the world, right? Then I disappear, you disappear, and the world disappears, and just this conversation is happening. And where is God if not in this conversation? Like, we don't say God, but my point is that it points to something similar, right? We're all pointing in the... So, in terms of prayer, in our tradition, we don't actually pray per se, but this vow can look a little bit like, when I hold a Judeo-Christian prayer, oftentimes it's "Thy will, not mine, be done," right? Thy will, not mine, be done. That "Thy will not," like, is at the end of the Lord's Prayer in Christianity, right? So, but similarly, if we put down our stories, as I said, like, our stories are so confusing when we see the gamut of stories, and that none of the stories are actually true. We come to this place, as I said, where we don't know, and the only thing that makes sense is, how can I help? Well, how can I help and "Thy will, not mine, be done" are pretty much the same. So it's all coming to the same place. And then the last thing, they're pointing, our thoughts might make them different, but they're pointing at the same thing. The fingers may be, this is my left finger and this is my right finger. They may be different, but they're pointing to the same or a similar place, right? And then the last thing is to say that while we don't pray, first of all, a practice is to hold all day long, just how can I help, how can I help? Like, to let your mind come back to that over and over again, which is very close to a prayer, if you like. And we also chant. We have a chant in our tradition. We have a number of chants that are repeating the names of different bodhisattvas. The one we use the most is called Kwanseum Bosal. Kwanseum Bosal is the Korean name for Kwan Yin, which is the Bodhisattva Avilatthikesvara. I never can say that word fast. It's the Bodhisattva of compassion. And we say, so in our chants, in our Kwanseum Bosal chant, it goes Kwanseum Bosal, Kwanseum Bosal, because you lived, is basically just saying over and over again the name of the saint, if you will, the saint of compassion. And and I really love this, as the story goes, if we actually, in all sincerity, chant the name of the saint of compassion, Kwanseum Bosal, with sincerity, and send that energy of compassion out into the world, right? If we're saying Kwanseum Bosal and sending Kwanseum Bosal, intending that Kwanseum Bosal goes out into the world, we actually have become Kwanseum Bosal. We are embodying Kwanseum Bosal at that moment. And so when you're embodying Kwanseum Bosal, there's no one to pray and no one to pray to. Okay? You're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah, we tend to just sit if nobody asks a question. We have about 5 more minutes.
Can you repeat the point about what to do when someone is asking about their feelings about Donald Trump and just venting on Facebook? Can you come back to that?
When somebody else is venting?
Or either way.
Or when I'm venting? Sure. I mean, what I was saying is that I see problems that arise in the world, like the fires in the Amazon and in the Congo, or like people being hit by cars in the streets of New York. And that the feeling of actually recognizing the injustice or the harm that's being done is uncomfortable. So some sort of sadness might arise in me, or grief might arise in me, and it's actually for me, it's physical. Like I can feel like this sadness or this physicality. Almost sometimes the feeling can be so strong that it actually feels dangerous. I don't know if you've ever experienced like the feeling when you're anxious of tightness in your chest that's so strong that you think that your heart might be in danger. I think it's an unreasonable fear, at least in my case, but that the physical sensation that comes with in our response to some of the sad things that we see is very strong, and there's an aversion within us, a desire to get rid of it. So, a lot of times it's said that if we're not careful, that we lead our lives almost like desire machines, trying to move towards that which is pleasant, and move away from that which is unpleasant. There's this delusion that it's actually possible to come to a place of complete pleasantness, like there can be peace, a complete peace or something. And so we're constantly chasing, we can be like desire, if we're not careful, we can become like machines who chase after what we want and run away from what we don't want, and that's all we do. So sometimes when there's an injustice that occurs, on some micro level, it occurred instead of just like being with the sadness and the grief, right? Instead of just being with, I'm distraught about what's, I've been told these are the lungs of the world, and these are the lungs of the world, and there's no replacing them. Like, this is the one thing we can't, the burning down of the Amazon, for me, this is a story that I tell myself. And it's also a story, that is to say, who knows, I don't know what will happen. Like, once I start to tell that story, these are the lungs of the earth, that's the beginning of my storytelling, right? The truth is, the trees are burning, I'm distraught. Just like that, in my body, distraught, right? But in order to move that feeling out of my body, I go, it's the lungs of the world. We're chopping down the lungs of the world for meat. The reason why we're all eating meat is because, we're powering this ridiculous consumer economy. It's unhealthy for us to eat all this meat. Blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, either I'm posting on Facebook about all you meat eaters and cheese eaters, and just pissing off the meat eaters and the cheese eaters, and not really doing anything except for maybe consuming more electricity in some server farm somewhere, right? And actually, the distraught feeling has not even gone away, right? I hold on to the anger to try to move it, but it keeps coming, so I might repeat and do another angry act and another angry act, all in the hope that this feeling will go away, right? It's not to say that we should never vent on Facebook. It's to say that we should be conscious of what actually is going on and choose, right? So what would happen if instead I just felt distraught? What might arise what more productive thing might arise if I didn't push the feeling of being distraught away and sat with it and allow myself to not know, or in our tradition, in other traditions differently, said quantum boso, quantum boso, quantum boso, quantum boso, quantum boso, quantum boso. There's an article of faith in our tradition that if we hold that compassionate intention, that it's sooner or later a compassionate action will actually arise, right? Does that answer your question? No? Yes? Okay. Maybe that's it. Were there any pressing questions before we... Anybody in particular have a question? Thank you all very much. I thought, I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about this and worrying about it too, and then I was a little like, wait, no one's going to come. It's just going to be all that intention and then just like a quantum boso chant, but where is it going to go? Who knows? Don't know. So I really appreciate that you all showed, and I really appreciate also whatever intentionality has brought you here, that you actually care about this world that we're living in, and I hope you embrace that care. Thanks.
So, some cookies and tea for everybody. Have some on your way out. Please do. Our residents get somehow kind of flamed when we leave them a bunch of extra cookies and stuff like that. So that's almost their problem, but. So as Colin said, you're all very much welcome to come back to practice. You can find the information about our schedule, including our introductory classes online. I should point out that our school is effectively free of charge. Those of us who do decide to make this our home become members, but you're welcome to come without ever paying anything to practice here. That having been said, if you do feel compelled to make a donation, we have a little box over here. We appreciate it. Keep the lights on and such. We will also apply you with our various forms of paper. I call it propaganda, but I should probably dial that back. Our, stuff. Literature. There you go. Right. So again, thank you so much for coming out, and it's really great to have met all of you.
Thank you.
Good.